Hi, and welcome back to the Unstuck podcast. I'm Heather.
I'm Cameron.
Today we're going to talk about being conditional in all aspects of our life, and the cost that we pay to do that. Um, something that I have been thinking a lot about in my own personal life and working through was recognizing how conditional I had been with God my whole life. Um, when I found out about Cameron's porn addiction, when I realized that this little dream that I had created for myself uh, was not what it seemed, I was angry. I had a lot of resentment, frustration. I was upset with God because I had been living in a very conditional relationship with him, and I didn't understand that I was doing it. Um, as if it was like God's fault. Like he didn't follow through on a promise that he made to me when he never really made that promise. Um, and I realized that I was actually showing up to life where if I checked off all these different boxes, to that I would have a certain kind of life. So if I married the right person, if I kept myself honest and clean and pure and followed the commandments and lived up to um, this idea of what is worthy before God, then I would automatically be given these blessings that would come to me. And I just kind of settled into thinking, well, that's how it is. That's what it is, and that's what I wanted it, and that's what I needed it to be so desperately. And we've shared about this before on the podcast that part of that needing for me also created an environment that made it very difficult. Uh, it created extra roadblocks for Cameron in terms of feeling like he could come and talk to me and share what he was going through. Um, and who wants that, right? Who wants to be a roadblock for anybody? Even though we all have our own choices. Um, I personally want to live a life where I can show up in a way that I can be helpful and I can make it easier for others around me because I'm secure and I'm good in myself and my faith isn't conditional. And so this concept has been like really fascinating to me, and as I've unpacked how it's affected my life, I'm seeing it in, how it shows up in all aspects of our life. In how do we want to show up as human beings? What is the optimal way to show up as a human being?
What are some ways that, I think this is a very subtle concept. A lot of these things that we talk about are like that. They affect us. We are acting under them in lots of ways that we don't realize. What are some, what is being conditional? Like, what does that mean? And how are we doing it when we don't realize it?
Well, one of the things that I've been pondering on is the principle of tithing, and we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We believe, like many Christians, that we're asked to tithe 10% of our income to bless and help others. And I, as I've been thinking and pondering on this, like, how do we show up with that commandment? Um, and are we doing it simply to secure ourselves and be safe? Or are we doing it because we love God? Like, I really think it boils down to this, to our motivations behind why we're doing something. Um, so we have something like that where we're asked to do it. So are we buying? Are we transacting this deal with God that says, if I do this, you will do it the way that I think you should, right? So that the first time something shows up in our life where it's like, no, that's not how it's supposed to be, because I created this rule that said blessings look like this in my life. And so why isn't this working? Now there's anger and resentment, kind of like what I did when I found out about the addiction. Um, it was it was like, well, I did all the things right. Like, what did I do wrong? Why is this happening to me? Like, I
So
did the things.
is it more that, is it more that you didn't get what you were supposed to, or that you had you had supposed what the promise was.
I think it's both. I think we create these rules, and it's really, I think, truly unconscious. We're not. I think if anyone would stop again, yeah, that's stupid. You can't write a rule of what your life's going to look like because there's all these. Everyone has their own choices. My choices can impact you. My like we're driving in the car right now. You could swerve into this car and kill somebody, and would they deserve it? Like your choices impacted somebody else. So I think we consciously understand that, but then subconsciously we're like, well, if I'm good enough, if I follow all these rules, then this is what's best for me in my life. This is the best, highest way that I could live, and this is what I'm going for. And I think it's a very unconscious thing that we're putting out there. And then when it doesn't go that way, we get really dysregulated and uncomfortable, angry, all of those unfortunate feelings that come that way. And as we were talking about what we would discuss today, I mentioned, and I don't remember if we've talked about this on the podcast before, but we had a car stolen out of our driveway 4 years, 5 years ago now, maybe longer. My gosh. Um, and it was like Cameron walked inside. He was warming up the car. Done that for years. Lived in a really safe, quiet neighborhood. Nothing that we should have been concerned about. Comes out and just in time to see the car pulling out of our driveway, and someone stole it. And I was thinking about how we handled this. This is one of like, I handled, when I first found out about Cameron, I did not handle it the right way. I got angry at God. I got angry at life. Like I deserved something better. Like this broke my rule. For some reason, like we handled this one. I think this is one that I feel really good about. And I feel like we handled in a really positive, healthy way. I didn't automatically think that, well, we pay our tithing and, we go to church and we obey the commandments and we're living, life the way that God has asked us to. Like, so why would this happen to us? Um, I remember leaning heavily into faith that God understood our situation, um, compassion, and we sought to have compassion for whoever did it. In fact, we had a conversation with our kids where we said, like, look, whoever did this obviously isn't very healthy and happy, because happy people don't do things like that. Healthy people don't do that to other people. And this person needs our prayers. And we were also asking for help and for miracles on our part. I remember, a thought that I had to pray for was maybe this person could have a sense of sorrow for what they did and decide to return it. Like, and we would wake up one day and the car just would be in our driveway. Um, and I prayed for that, and that never happened. Um, but it was a thought I had. It was a desire of my heart, but I left it to God. And I remember, like, we had literally just finished paying off this car like 2 months before this happened. It was brand new when we bought it, and it was a good car. It had no problems whatsoever. And so I realized, I'm like, hey, like if this car never comes back, or if we find it totaled, like we're not going to be able to replace it with the insurance payout like to what we had. We're going to have a used car now that's likely to, have some issues, because used cars are often a gamble. Um, and we're going to have, maybe even if we don't want that, we're probably going to have a payment of some kind again. And, it wasn't what we wanted, but I was like, God, I just remember feeling God knew what we were going through. God um, would bless us and help us through it. And I didn't know what that would look like. And I've throughout the years have tried experimenting in difficult times like this, when I have the presence of mind to do it, is to get excited about how God will help, because I believe that he does. He's promised us that he won't leave us comfortless. He won't leave us stranded and alone. He desires to love and bless us. It's just the way he loves and blesses us sometimes doesn't match up with how we think we need to be loved and
And I
blessed.
think that's actually what it is, though. I think we are so often dealing with notions that are just not are not what they we're dealing with less developed notions. So it's like one of my favorite scriptures is Isaiah 55, 9 and 10. Oh gosh. Higher ways, higher thoughts. The exact verse I'm trying to remember, but it's about God speaking to Isaiah saying, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are higher than yours. And I really believe we're going to understand that no matter how smart someone is on this earth, it's going to be like dealing with a toddler to our Heavenly Father. And I do think we can, and if you think about that, there's so often there's the notion the toddler has of what's fair and correct, and and how they'll throw a tantrum when something doesn't seem correct to them. But you know that perhaps not running out in the street or playing with your helmet on for your bike, it's itchy. They don't want to do it. So their notion is why I don't fall. I'm a good cyclist. What's the problem? And
We just lack the understanding
right,
and maturity that comes from being an eternal being, that we just, like, you don't fault a child for not understanding that. God doesn't fault us for not understanding that, but he does help us, like, teach us the principles to help us get there. I think as you're talking about that, I think about that drawing of a little child who's holding onto a small teddy bear, and Christ is asking for it, and he has this huge one behind him. And I think that's a really simple, like, easy way to start the discussion. But oftentimes it's not necessarily that the blessing is obviously bigger and better, but sometimes it's just exactly what you need to help you through your life. Like, it might not look or appear even to yourself or sometimes to others, but it might just be the absolute most perfect thing. I'll finish up this story with the car, and then talk a little bit too about the time where, how this principle applies when we were when Cameron had lost his job, and we were like jobless for months and struggling, because I think I learn best through stories and how they apply, and I these have been really foundational experiences in our lives that have helped, we've drawn on for strength. But anyway, so with this car, we just leaned into faith. We prayed for the man, or we didn't know at the time who it was, but we prayed for the person who took it. We prayed that we would be helped to figure out a solution, and then we just trusted. And end of the story is, from a suggestion from my mother, we went out looking for it one night. Couldn't find it with the place that we had decided or felt to look. Said a prayer, and literally, as I was driving, I felt turn right, head to Walmart, and we found the car in the Walmart parking lot, up near the front where the security cameras could catch the person that had stolen it. And it was in like a 10-minute window where this person went in to make a return. And so, like, literally, it wasn't answered the way that I thought, the perfect, right? It didn't show up in our driveway. It actually required us to kind of take a leap of faith and go looking for a car. Who finds a stolen car? To listen to those promptings, even though they didn't make sense, and to do it the right, and like listen, so that the timing could have been so perfect. And so God blessed us, like, in a miraculous way, and one that I think it wasn't just about finding our car, because I draw on this experience all the time. If God can show me and tell me where to find this stolen car in this small window of time, like in a busy Walmart parking lot, then God surely can help me with this other thing that's way more serious, right? This other area of my life. I've even applied this circumstance as I've been struggling with learning how to forgive Cameron, and learning how to trust again, and how to trust God again, because I felt for so long like I know Cameron didn't feel like he could tell me, but why didn't God tell me? God could have told me about this. He didn't. And so learning to trust God and understand his timing is perfect. And I've used this. It's been something that it was a gift. Like what happened wasn't a punishment. And I think we could have so easily turned it into that. What did we do wrong? Why would God do this? We just paid it off. Like, aren't we doing what we're supposed to do? And like turned into this, leaned into bitterness. But instead, thankfully, we took it as an opportunity to seek his counsel, his help, to lean into faith and trust that he would help us. And you know what? Help still could have been, like, I know we got the car back, but help still could have looked like a really nice, like a payoff with insurance, or a car coming in another way. Like, there were so many ways God could have answered that prayer. And like he chose in this circumstance for it to be miraculous. He chose to give us a little bit of a miracle, and one that we can't deny had to come from God, because like he told me where to go as a faith building and faith promoting, and a reminder that he loves us, he cares, and he's there. Um, but it doesn't always happen that way. And are we looking for those miracles when something bad happens? Or are we consider is it conditional? Are blessings conditional? Are trials conditional? Like are we only going through trials because we messed up? How are we approaching life, and through what lens do we choose to look at these things?
I think I'd like to talk a little bit more how this happens, being conditional, how it happens subtly, like in our conversations and in um, our transactions with each other, uh, how we interact, and like how that can show up. How can conditional be show up in like small ways, like I don't know, like if I feel that um, you're not paying attention to my needs, or
Mm.
say I uh, uh, say like I was doing something really nice for you today, and you know, in hopes that maybe we'd be intimate or something later. Like how does this show up in other ways that like that we just wouldn't
Well,
recognize?
we could talk about what happened last night.
Money.
So last night we were stuck in awful traffic.
Oh, yeah.
We got home late. It was like 7 o'clock. We were both really hungry. Because we're being very intentional with our food, so it's not like just grab a snack or something here or there to fill the void. Like we're trying to fill our bodies with proper nutrition and the nutrients that they need to produce a certain result. So we're being very, conscientious and intentional, and we were very hungry. And so we got home and we're making food, and Cameron, he's I was finishing mine because we're eating a little differently, and he sat down and he said his blessing on his food and he started eating. And I was like, I wasn't really upset when I noticed it, but I was like, huh, like sometimes that happens, and why? Like, and I feel like it was like, why not just ask, like, hey, can we say a prayer together? Why not do that? And I was so 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 I remember like feeling like I definitely didn't like how that felt. And but then I reminded myself, I'm like, but like, how are ways he does show up and show that he cares for you and is respectful? Like, I don't like, is this really indicative of him like not respecting you or not caring about your thoughts? And I like thought of all these different examples that of ways that he had shown up. To like, he texts me like, are you eating? And he'll pack my lunch when I'm getting ready in the morning, and he'll check in on me, and do all these other things that show like, no, he really does care. He's not trying to like leave me out, or leave, not caring if I'm how I'm doing. He was hungry and doing that. And so like, I think sometimes we can often zero in on one aspect of something that we don't like and forget all the others because we're looking for it. And this is kind of like a deeper discussion, and we should have one on beliefs one day, and like how they work in our lives, and how a lot of them are unconscious, and
Well, I
and
think
and
some of our conditional actions come from, not some of them, I think almost all of them come from beliefs that we have. And so if you believe that you're the type of person who's left behind,
and
then
I
this will show
identified
up.
that last night in our
Yeah.
conversation. I identified that like I actually do have that as something that's inside, because I felt that way as a child. Now, um, in a lot of ways, like at school with other kids and things like that. And so like that's a belief about myself. And so because of how our brains work, we're going to be collecting only the evidence of things we believe, and we'll ignore the others. We might notice it, but we won't hold on to it. We won't remember that in moments where we're triggered or upset. We'll only remember what we've trained our brain to look for. Um, and so, uh, anyway, the rest of the I did have that whole line of thinking, and I realized I was being conditional with like choosing to just focus on this, as opposed to um
Well, how is it conditional?
How was it conditional?
Yeah.
Because I placed a condition on you that if you really loved and cared about me and you really were considerate, that you would have just said, hey, can we, as well, that's what we talked about. Hey, can we just say a prayer together? Or are you ready? Or is there anything I can do to help you? Like I was giving you all these rules that I would have played by as showing up in my
I
highest and
really
best
think
self.
that's the key. I think a lot of this conditional aspect comes from making rules that aren't always explicitly agreed upon. Sometimes they are, but if I had, I don't know, I mean, I think we did implicitly um, agree upon this, and I probably should have just waited. But at the same time, I don't know. I think
Like you have a
in
different
my
you,
mind, I didn't recognize I was breaking a rule.
and he wouldn't have cared if I did that to him
Right,
because it's not important to him.
right. So
And
in
so
my mind, the rule is it didn't matter. You're going to sit down with me in a minute, and we're going to be, and you just would have been eating if you had started.
and you
Like,
wouldn't want me to wait to eat if you were that hungry.
yeah,
And so it's just we're just coming at it from different perspectives, and not one of those perspectives meant that like you didn't care about me. You know,
right.
it didn't mean that.
So maybe that's the issue with it being conditional. The conditionality of it is that it produces negative implications that are not only are not necessarily true, they just they don't have to. So I always say, like, if there's multiple possibilities that you can do, like when something happens. So for instance, say you're walking down the street and you have an interaction with somebody, and um, you think it might be rude, but you can't tell. Like it might have been like passive aggressive or something like that. And my point is, if there's multiple ways to take something, you might as well pick the most positive.
Especially if you're
Right.
never gonna know.
Right, especially if you're never going to know.
Yeah.
But even if you think you could know in the future, at that moment, you might as well just operate on the most positive possibility that you're given at that point. There's just no point in choosing the
You'll
more
show
negative
up
one.
better to life by doing that,
I really think,
and influence people feeling differently about you
yeah,
by doing that.
I've noticed that happens a lot where people will choose the negative thing happening. I remember one time uh, uh, we were dealing. Heather will know this as I'm going to keep it vague just because I don't want to be specific. But we were dealing with somebody um, in a pretty large transaction, and we we didn't know them very well, and it kept we kept getting like weird, kind
Like
of like
hints
weird,
and feelings
yeah.
that this person wasn't liking
And
us, that they were upset with
and,
us.
and I remember we explicitly we talked about it, and we were like, okay, we don't know what's going on, but we're just going to go ahead and just say we're this person is just being a little awkward.
Well, we're gonna continue acting as if that assumption wasn't true, and we'll respond just as good people and kind people without taking offense,
Yes.
like to speak to open up the way for that.
Now, eventually, we did know
Well, and
explicitly
the
that it
person
was.
came out and was very rude and came out right and said like their feelings
Yeah.
and well, not all of them. We don't even know the extent of
No.
it, but it was obvious that like, hey, we were sensing this
And,
correctly.
and then we acted a little bit differently, but even then, we tried to take the best tack possible for the situation. And I really do think part of releasing conditionality is doing that, is taking the best possible scenario you have with the information and what's happening, just acting on that. Because it just doesn't seem like it's even helpful to you. But so often we'll pick a negative thing over a more positive thing. I think because I don't know.
It's
The
easier.
type of soothing. I think it's the type of soothing. We
Well,
have a whole episode on.
it's easier, and you can become a victim, and that's easy. It's the easiest thing to do because people will feel sorry for
Right.
you. People will tell you that, yep, you've been wronged, all this. And so it's just a very convenient, easy, like anything that's like taking you away from progression and growth, you fall into it. Progression and growth and like positivity and becoming like God, it's a climb. It's not it's not something that you just fall into, and it's on purpose that way because it requires a desire and a heart to do it, and the effort and the work to progress, to move up, to climb. And falling is as easy as just letting go and just allowing life to happen and things to happen. And that's not to say that you can't be a victim of other people's circumstances, but and deal with other. That's not to say that you can't be harmed by somebody's choices and be in a position where you had nothing to do with this bad thing that happened. Um, I just keep having in my head like victim shaming, and maybe I should let go of that.
Yeah, okay.
And, and that's not to say that things, things can't happen to you that are wrong, and I'm not talking about that, like that, people are victimized, but being a victim and claiming that as a title and as something that you are, will is the easier path. Like, and we've talked before about the example of Elizabeth Smart and all the terrible things that happened to her, and her choice to say he's taken, so much, that the man who kidnapped her and raped her and brainwashed her had already taken enough of her life that she would choose not to give him more, and how much easier it would have been for her to just like people would have surrounded her and said, yeah, of course you're going through this. Of course this is a result in your life. Of course you're going to be downtrodden and maybe, have this affect you so negatively the rest of your life. There are no shortage of people that would surround, and in the effort to love, right? I don't think they're trying to do anything.
Well, and there's a space for that too.
Yes.
There is a space for that.
But the fact that she chose to say, I'm not going to let him direct my path. I don't have to be a victim anymore. I was one. I was held against my will, but not anymore. And I'm going to turn this into something powerful and positive. And she has. Look what she's done. She has a foundation. She helps victims of terrible abuse all the time because she chose to climb. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about.
So I think just to tie that one off a little bit is there is a space to mourn. Mourning is not bad. Mourning is a space for healing and a space for receiving care and doing
to fill your cup back up.
Yeah, but there is a space that starts to happen after that. That's beyond that. But back to being conditional. I think there's we often just have these notions in our head of how something is supposed to go, and then when it doesn't, we receive feelings of bitterness and resentment, and we tend to trying to get into those.
It really is what we were speaking about, that we have these rules that we've written, and when other people don't follow our rules that we haven't even agreed upon, there's no agreement. Right. Cameron and I did not have an agreement last night that him not asking to say a prayer with me over our food and waiting to eat was a sign of disrespect. There was no agreement. We hadn't discussed it. He didn't know. And so the fact that I would be offended over that or choose to hurt over that was me falling into this rule book that I created and did not share with him and did not have an agreement with him on. And I think that's where our conditions come. I had a condition with God that if I and it was I wrote it. I didn't consult with God over it. It was an assumption that I made based on unconscious ties I put together as I learned things, growing up, and that God blesses you when you do the right thing, right? That's a true principle. But I turned it into, well, I won't have anything bad happen. I think it's these unwritten rules, and if we hold on to them, we're going to be a whole lot unhappier, and we're going to fall into a victimhood of life that we don't have to. I mentioned earlier I wanted to share a story about when Cameron lost his job, and we were without work for months, and just in this really difficult place. And really, to fast forward to the end of the story, it required a cross-country move, complete draining of our savings, literally to the penny, and just uprooting our whole lives. And we could have looked at that as a punishment, or what did we do wrong? To bring back tithing into the conversation, we pay our tithing. Why would God remove our job? And then we're not finding one. We had literally just bought a house, probably not even that much, about 5 months previous. We just bought a house, just bought the car that was stolen as a commuter car because he worked about 45 minutes away, and just had a baby. He was 9 days old when he lost his job. And I remember like it was this choice. I'm like, I could be upset or I could go, okay, God knows our circumstances. And and I believe him when he says he'll help us. And I remember when we qualified for unemployment, for, X number of weeks. And I'm like, okay, well, we must have a job by the end of this because God knows we won't be able to do this past this point. And I just put my faith in like, God will figure this out. What can we do to help that? Um, and then, like I said, fast forward, we lived in Virginia. We had a little 5 acre uh, lot at the end of a private road in the country, cousins right next door, and just beautiful property. And we thought this was going to be our home for a really long time. And then all of a sudden, we can't afford it. We got to move. It could have been this just catastrophe, but we chose like, and again, this is one of our shining moments, where I remember like when we got to Utah, we had moved into our new home, um, and I was paying the bills, and we went from being paid twice a month from on Cameron's paycheck to a once a month. And because you'd only worked like part of the month, like our first check was only half of what it could have been. And like I literally like paid all of the bills and all of the things, expenses that we needed. And we literally, it was like pennies left, like almost to the exact penny. Um, and I just remember like I at first I was like, wow. Like I was disappointed because I didn't want that, who doesn't want to have their savings back up? But like I remember just thinking like God knew. Like he planned this out so perfectly that it was literally to the penny that we would have enough to get us from where we were to where we were there. And I just remember counting the blessings. Cameron's job usually doesn't the work that where he works does not usually pay for uh staff to relocate, and they did. They paid all of our moving expenses. Um, we had a family we could stay with at first, and we immediately, like, very quickly found a home that was affordable to move into. Uh, we had our the reason why our savings was as large as it was is that our tax return that year, based on like different a change of jobs and things like that, like was way bigger than it ever was before. Um, and I'm like, wow, like God really like of course my version of things when we had that big tax return was like, oh man, our savings like just went up so much, and like that was my version of a blessing. Little did I know that the real blessing was that will provide for our family and get us safely to where we need to be, and relocated where we're going to thrive. And in hindsight, 10 years later, we have thrived here. This move actually, it introduced me to the mindset training and the coaching work that I do now. It provided a foundation for me to be able to handle the revelation of Cameron's of his the addiction and the recovery. Like I was better equipped because of what I learned when we moved here, and I wouldn't have had that had we stayed. Like the work that I do now with the nonprofit foundation, I wouldn't have there. Like there's just so many pieces that I think God knew we needed, and it took that like gut wrenching like you know blow, because a little like prequel to the story is Cameron was let go from another job. What was it? Probably 3.5, 4 years previous, and had gone back to school for 3.5 years. And this job that he got was a new job, and it's what moved us to this location in about 2 hours away from where we were living. And and then again he was let go. It was like bam, bam, and we really could have leaned into. And I think you even mentioned struggling with that a little bit. You kind of did a little bit. I don't know what helped me. I mean, we were studying the Old Testament that year, and I found a lot of strength from the Israelites and their journey, and for 40 years in the wilderness, and I found a lot of help and hope in that because like God knew and He blessed and provided, and I saw those blessings. But man, like we really could have looked at that from a whole different lens, and I'm grateful we chose the lens of miracles and the lens of God providing and looking out for us in ways that we didn't even think to know. We wouldn't have ever thought to like just look to move to Utah. Like we weren't, that wasn't on our radar, but yet it's been a huge blessing for our family. And so yeah, like I just, when we're conditional with what things have to look like and why these trials pop up in our life, we really limit the growth and the blessings and miracles that can come if we look for them.
To wrap up, how can we not be conditional? I think the task to not be conditional requires us to let go of the notion of how something should show up. I do think it's appropriate, and even I think it's what you should do is to move towards something that you do want, have something in mind, but allow something to show up how it's going to show up. If you're trying to influence your partner to be in a different way or something like that, recognize that it's influence. It's not control. It's not I'm doing this, so you should be doing that. It's I'm doing this in hopes that you will change, and I will communicate and allow you to show up in ways that um, I won't try to guess it. I won't try to put a specific specificity on it. And I think that's really important.
I think also when you're having these, like, be conscious of the contracts that you're writing, especially with those closest in your life. If you find yourself in a, like, well, my husband or wife is doing this and it's disrespectful to me, like, challenge that for a second. Like, have you ever talked to them about your feelings on that? Do they understand how you feel with when this happens? And do you need to feel this way when this happens? It's not just someone else's job to make you feel better. You get to choose how you feel and how you show up, and then really, like, challenge it. Just, it was really helpful for me last night to to stop for a second and remember, okay, but Cameron does this, and this that shows he cares about me. He's thinking about me. He's wanting my success. He wants me to be happy. And just because this happened this way, he's just, I don't think he means for it to come across that way. He's not deliberately trying to disrespect me right now. But then have the conversation. And we did have a conversation, and I asked a question in a really loaded way, and it led to us needing to rewrite a little bit of how we go about discussing these things. But so that would be my advice, is to have those discussions, so that others are aware that this is meaningful. It's meaningful to me that he would say, hey, can we pray together? Or just say, hey, I'm going to eat. It doesn't even, like, I didn't even care if he started eating first. It was just like, in my mind, I'm like, he could have just said, like, are you good if I start? It would have showed that he cared that what I thought or how I felt. And like, just communicate, like, that's meaningful to me. But not in a way that you need them to change. Because if you need them to change, it's going to be very conditional, and it leaves no room for their feelings. And I think that's what you were feeling last night, was like, but I'm not disrespecting you. I don't see it that way. I wouldn't care if you did this. So then there's a defense, a fight, and you're just going to create more conflict. Seek to understand each other. Share, like, actually, like, ask the question, like, you know, how do you want to be treated? I'd like to know, because I want to treat you the way that you feel, that helps you feel good, helps you know that I love you, because I do love you. And, like, the more you can communicate on that level to seek to understand, and then have agreements based on things you've talked about, not unwritten rules. Well, they're not unwritten. They're written only in your own mind that the other is not aware of. I think that helps us to live less conditional and more unconditionally, and allows us to grow and work together as a team, and not so much, watching for what the other person does to me that hurts. And then I have a reason to be upset. Like, we get our dander up so much, and
Yeah.
it doesn't produce results that are desirable. It's unhappy living.
No, it's unhappy. You'll constantly be in disappointment if you have an agenda, because the likelihood that your agenda will be followed all the time is practically zero.
Have one, though, like, have desires and wants, pray for those things, but I think the key for me that I'm learning is ask for it, and then expect God to make it even better. And maybe you and God are like a perfect alignment sometimes, and it comes exactly the way you want. But when it comes, allow it to come in the better form, even if it doesn't look like that. Because just like our move across country and our draining of our savings didn't look ideal, it really was exactly what we needed and has produced so many more blessings for our family. Anyway, I think that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching and sharing. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let your friends know, let your family know that there's a place here on our little space of YouTube or a podcast, whatever you're listening on, where couples who are desiring um, epic intimacy, really traveling life together on this planet and making the most of it as a team, that there's a place for support, and we're here to help you along the way. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.